So good afternoon. My name is Tammy Waller, and I'm the Director for K-12 Social Studies and World and Native Languages at the Arizona Department of Education. And I'm really excited to be here and hear your testimony. And I will turn it over to Judge Simons, or is it Judge Simons?
Hello, everyone. My name is Lynn Simons, and I'm a district court judge in the state of Nevada. And I'm excited to be here. This is my second time judging nationals, first time via Zoom. The first thing that I'm going to just say to you is take a very deep breath right now, and we're excited to hear you.
Hi, my name is Murray Snow. I am the Chief Judge for the Federal Court in Arizona. I'm also glad to be here and will enjoy talking with you.
And we'd love to hear you introduce yourselves.
My name is Ryan Mulrennan. We're from Blue Valley Northwest High School, and our mentor is Ken Thomas.
My name is Jack Levine. I'm also from Blue Valley Northwest.
I'm Mayan Bhagavan. I'm a senior at Blue Valley Northwest.
Excellent. So we are doing Unit 6, What Challenges Might Face American Constitutional Democracy in the 21st Century. Question number 1. Thomas Hobbes noted that life in a state of nature is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. How has the human condition changed over time? And how is that change reflected in our expectations of government? Should the principles of natural rights or classical republicanism guide policy changes designed to improve the condition of all people? What are the most pressing domestic and global challenges facing Americans today and in the future? What policies can you suggest to address them?
Hobbes wrote on the natural condition of mankind in the midst of the English Civil War, when Europe had yet to modernize. Although poverty and political instability remain prevalent in the present day, the expanded roles of government better address such issues. Leviathan presents two alternatives: a state of nature or rule by an unaccountable sovereign. Today's world offers representative democracy, which maintains a social and political order while allowing for participation and oversight. Citizens voluntarily enter into a contract, thereby surrendering minimal privileges in return for stability and services. Modern expectations consequentially grew due to larger government. While the human condition has improved, the nature of humanity remains static.
Those in Hobbes' day lived near a state of nature within a feudal society and a subsistence economy. England gradually progressed from rudimentary English poor laws to full-on welfare state. In the United States, similar advancements arose since the Great Depression and the rise of a social safety net. Medicaid, unemployment benefits, and food stamps improved conditions of poverty in the modern day. Many now call on the government to take on greater roles in funding universal healthcare and free post-secondary education. Nevertheless, wealth inequality is at its highest level in more than 50 years. Corporate greed reflects Hobbes' theorization on self-interest.
The natural rights philosophy satisfies individualism as part of the human condition, while classical republicanism provides for basic needs through social contract theory. Natural rights are inalienable and protected by law. These include life, liberty, property, and free and independent thought, and the right to question the government. Classical republicanism prioritizes organization and civic virtue and is often associated with protecting the common good and safety of republic's constituents. Each ideology cannot exist without the other, therefore balance is necessary. The common good preserves the ability of individuals to pursue their natural rights up until the limit of infringing upon others' rights. Sacrificing civil liberties to curtail threats to the common good is justified except for when it enables arbitrary uses of power.
Climate change remains one of the most pressing domestic and global issues. We will witness a true state of nature in the coming years due to rising rates of natural disasters and the resulting climate refugees. President Biden recently pledged to cut carbon emissions in half by 2030. Additionally, Congress should consider ambitious legislation, such as the Green New Deal, which would subsidize green industries and overhaul infrastructure. Governments from the local to national levels must hold corporations accountable. The lack of stringent environmental regulations means that corporations will continue to push the most profitable manufacturing strategy regardless of its implications. Many companies have been accused of greenwashing, where they market themselves as eco-conscious through initiatives such as disinvestment in fossil fuel stocks while still posing a threat to the environment.
Each country bears the responsibility to combat climate change, meaning that global cooperation is imperative. The United States is headed in the right direction after rejoining the Paris Climate Accord. One major issue with this form of diplomacy, however, is that no enforcement mechanisms are in place. Some have proposed a so-called climate club in which non-members are penalized. Others argue that more specific policies should be enacted within industries through bilateral agreements and as part of intergovernmental organizations.
We are ready for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So my question has to deal with tension. How do we solve the tensions that will arise between the two philosophies, the classical Republican and the natural rights philosophy, as we work to solve domestic and global challenges?
We see currently during the coronavirus pandemic how the two philosophies somewhat have tension but can also be balanced. So, for example, the national government is able to procure vaccines and more follow the classical republicanism by providing for the common good, while the states are interested in preserving personal liberties in the natural rights philosophy through deciding at which point they must stop encroaching on personal liberties through mask mandates and mandatory vaccinations.
And furthermore, in terms of public health and safety, we see this also in realms of security as technology is modernizing and the government is having access to more information. Balancing that with privacy is a huge concern for many Americans and the government wanting to ensure that they're able to prevent acts of terrorism that are able to be seen through data online. So it's just a balance of what's necessary for public safety as opposed to personal privacy.
In addition, due process protections, such as having clear and stringent sort of regulations and guidelines as to what justifies intrusions into privacy, surveillance, etc., is necessary to maintain equality across the board in conducting those intrusions.
All right. You mentioned in your testimony that need for global cooperation, and you identified that we are moving in the right direction by re-entering the Paris Climate Accord. What other global entities or organizations should the United States remain or a part of or become a part of in order to address global challenges?
There are a variety of organizations that the United States is able to either join or work with. Examples would be non-governmental organizations, which can consult the United States on climate initiatives, and then also intergovernmental organizations that bring countries together in creating accords over climate change.
Do you have any specific names of organizations, whether related to climate or not, that you as a panel believe we should be a part of?
Specifically, I would reference the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is the UN branch of climate control, which would really help work with the world democracies. And I mean, we see this as a crucial role in balancing, because all of these corporations that are operating on an international scale can no longer be controlled just by US mandates or just by a single country's mandates. So something like the UN's really be helpful for this.
Let me continue pursuing the international theme and ask, to what extent can or should the United States facilitate and even subsidize the administration of the COVID vaccinations worldwide without creating the perception that it is not serving American interests first?
Well, we have seen this issue arise over the inequality of vaccine procurement across the world. So, for example, in developing countries, they will not be able to vaccinate for the next coming years, whereas the United States and other developed countries have actually received more vaccinations than they need, sometimes as much as 4 to 5 times their population requires. And so the United States can work with COVAX and other initiatives to increase the vaccine availability in developing nations.
I believe it comes down to a question of the level of altruism that the United States government is willing to participate in on a global scale. As my colleague said, there are some of the most developed nations, like the US, have received large amounts of vaccine and are even funding it. And so at a certain point, there should be some type of participation with global entities that can help underdeveloped nations receive vaccinations.
Thank you.
Okay, so kind of sticking with this idea of the pandemic that we've been looking at, to what extent do you believe the pandemic has changed our expectation of government?
I think we've seen a huge shift in what we expect of the government, because everyone is looking to their various levels of federalism for mandates and for vaccine availability, as Ryan mentioned previously. So on a local scale, we've had our local governments coming out with mask mandates and quarantine mandates, and even mandates on businesses and schools and whether they can be open and operating at full capacity. So I think we've seen a huge shift in all of the American citizens looking to the government for things that will help them get through the pandemic, and organizing on different scales with federalism has been a huge issue, because the federal government has been passing it down to state governments, who's been passing it down to local governments.
Another specific example is the recent stimulus bill, which sort of indicated that COVID had caused the economy to sort of enter a period of slow growth in which small businesses and individuals were compromised financially, and an agreement upon a stimulus bill would help sort of reinvest into that.
Tying this back into a historical perspective, we see that questions over the national government's role in economics have been around since the beginning of the Republic. So even early on, the question over a centralized bank, this relates to nowadays whether the United States should be passing stimulus packages.
So you spoke a lot about global cooperation and items that we need to address the pressing issue of climate change, both in the United States and globally. But what if it all goes south, for lack of a better word? And when is it appropriate for the United States to declare war?
We think that cross-country collaboration on initiatives such as climate change, other forms of trade, etc., would create mutual incentives for restraint for countries to be too invested into sort of interdependence and other countries being necessary for their infrastructure in order to go to war or in order to start a conflict.
We would also propose that the United States should use other measures before declaring war, such as economic sanctions.
And you see this heavily present on what we're proposing actions against Russia in cutting international banking systems to punish them economically, rather than to take damaging and dangerous actual physical action against them.
So, oh,
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for your questions.
Thank you.
So we have just a little bit of feedback, and I want to say, first of all, thank you for taking the time to really watch the pacing of your presentation. You were very very deliberative, and we were able to hear, understand, and really reflect on what you were saying, because you weren't going too fast, which is a hard thing to do because it's a little bit nerve-wracking to be doing a hearing. But I really appreciate that because it really allowed me to listen very carefully and really get an idea of where you were going, and I wasn't playing catch up in my mind the whole time. I thought you did a really nice job historically of showing the changes in how the human condition has changed in our expectations of government. I guess the one thing I might say for future rounds is to maybe think about as you're answering some of the follow-up questions, think about maybe the other perspective that might be there, and maybe where that might come in. So I thought you guys did an excellent job, though. Thank you.
I thought you did a great job too. I wrote down the same thing about pace. I thought that your pace was easy to follow. I thought you worked at making sure you weren't talking too fast, and you complemented each other very well. I would be careful about your voice dropping at the end of a statement. I think Mayan did that just a bit. Just make sure that you are the experts presenting to a congressional body, and so make sure that every word can be heard. I really liked how you gave, it was a great visual about what was happening in the time of Hobbes, and then how you brought that forward. I thought that was very effective and creative. And in answer to my question regarding war, I really appreciated how you said you're basically setting up these other situations so it's mutual restraint. It doesn't make any sense for anyone to go to war because of this. And I thought that was a very creative answer, and in essence highlighted the other things you can do. Be careful about saying sort of in places, and it's okay to, I agree regarding maybe differ a bit, or to expound on my colleague, or in contrast to my colleague, blah, 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 just to set up a little bit of tension. But good job, I enjoyed it.
I thought that the environmental example, I thought you nicely explained and clearly explained how the interests of the collective are not the same as the interests of the individual, which is a nice contrast with sort of the Hobbes, Republican and individual rights theory. I do also think, and I was appreciative of your pacing, which I know takes some discipline. I do think on occasion, you were very good about saying what you wanted to say, which wasn't always directly answering. Judge Simons was very complimentary of you about how you answered her war question, but you never really answered the question she asked. You just sort of answered another question. So think about that. And Jack, I actually say this by way of compliment. When you talked about the altruism of the United States in providing vaccine to the rest of the world, but might there be other motives? Might there be a reason that it would really make sense for the United States to provide those vaccines? So, there's always some things to think about in terms of the practicality of some of the philosophers that you've met to try and bridge Hobbes and Locke. But all in all, I enjoyed the presentation. Would love to have further discussions with you gentlemen, and thank you very much.